Established in 1858, Esterbrook has a long history of creating some of the most recognizable and revered pens from the golden age of fountain pens.
But I'm not here to talk about that. Yes, the golden age of fountain pens is arguably over. No one needs them anymore. But we kind of do though. You see, the Esterbrook of today is not at all what they once were. And they don't need to be. Because guess what? The people who use fountain pens are not at all what they once were. Today I'm going to talk a little bit to you about Esterbrook, a bit more about the Esterbrook Estie, and a lot of what makes both super unique. I'm not going to focus too much on history, obviously, because it's not important for the context of this video. I'll say this though, all of the major American fountain pen brands of the 20th century have been sold, purchased, relocated, sold again, and yeah, Esterbrook was not immune to this oh-so-common chain of events. But in 2018, New York-based fountain pen distributor Kenro Industries bought the brand, and they began to bring it back, slowly and methodically. The Esterbrook Estie quickly became their flagship pen. They have plenty of other models, but the Estie is the best representation of what the modern Esterbrook stands for. I'll explain what I mean by that in a bit, but let's start by breaking down the pen itself. At first glance, the Estie is fairly straightforward. It's a standard cigar-shaped fountain pen, pretty basic, with no exterior trim or hardware other than the clip. You do have an engraved and filled Esterbrook logo here at the base of the cap. Once you unscrew it, you're greeted with one of my favorite things about Estie's actual build, the spring-loaded inner cushion cap. You can see that there's a little bounce here, and that's because the inner cap pushes tightly against the grip section here because of the support of that spring. This ensures an airtight seal so that you can feel fine about leaving this pen unused with less concern of it drying out on you too fast. You're also greeted with a pair of trim rings here at the grip and some very unassuming threads. This pen is a cartridge converter fountain pen, but there's also a piston version. We'll talk more about that later. The nib is a steel Jowo No. 6 size nib made in Germany, and that's the one we offer here anyway. On Esterbrook's website, you can find some 18 karat gold nib options as well for a considerable upcharge, but they're out there. Another addition that Esterbrook decided to manufacture and sell was a separate grip section that would be compatible with vintage Esterbrook nibs. Because they were so plentiful back in the day, these nibs from the 50s and 60s can still be, relatively easy to find, and they can be used in the modern Estie with this crazy MV adapter that they somehow managed to make. That's also available at the Esterbrook site. Again, Esterbrook is really focusing on the community with this one. Speaking of the Estie nib and the pen community, this brings me to my favorite part about this pen. You may or may not know this, but there are people across the world who offer professional nib customization and repair services. These nib technicians were once incredibly rare, but in the last 10 years, the pen community has been so fortunate enough to see an incredible rise in the amount of talented professionals who both operate and manage web-based commissions and or perform on-site pen work at pen shows. So, pen work. These folks help pen users by breathing life into a pen that was destined for the graveyard. They can tune a nib so that it's in that baby bear porridge zone for its owner, or they can reshape the nib entirely to provide a writing experience that is far beyond the simple extra fine, medium, and broad sort of situation that you usually get with fountain pen nibs. What does the Estie have to do with any of this? Well, apparently, creating a grip section that can fit 60-year-old nibs wasn't enough of a challenge, so Esterbrook decided that they would be the first fountain pen company ever to simultaneously partner with 4 of the most renowned nib technicians in the fountain pen world to craft their own specialty nibs to be sold, ongoing, installed on the Esterbrook Estie. I won't get too much into this, but most of the world's independent nib workers do not do that full time. So coordinating all of this is a huge undertaking. Anyway, I want to introduce you to the technicians Esterbrook has teamed up with and show you how cool their nibs are. The first nib we're going to look at is crafted by Gina Salarino of Custom Nib Studio in Los Angeles. Gina says that their journaler nib is a medium stub grind based on the vintage Esterbrook 9314M nib. I don't know what that means, but the idea is that it's smooth and friendly enough for everyday use, gives you some writing flair, and all without being too huge for practical writing. So little tiny stub nib, kinda. Up in New York, Nib Jedi Josh Lax brings his Scribe nib to the Estie. The Scribe is Josh's take on an Architect. The Architect nib delivers a wide side-to-side stroke and a narrow up and down stroke, which is kind of the opposite of Gina's grind. Architects can sometimes be a little sharp on the edges, so Josh keeps his version smooth so that they can be used by a wider variety of fountain pen users. Kirk Spear of Pen Realm also lends his considerable talents to Esterbrook. He produces his popular needlepoint nib from over in his HQ in Colorado. This nib is pretty self-explanatory. It puts down an even smaller line than the standard Yovo Extra Fine, so if you want to write small, this is the way to go. Finally, all the way from Japan, we have the Techo nib, made by the enigmatic nib wizard known only as CY of Tokyo Station Pens. The Techo nib is described by CY as a miniaturized adaptation of Sailor's famous Naginata Togi, thus allowing you an all-in-one experience with both thick and thin lines at your fingertips, depending on how high or low your writing angle is. I'll include links to each of these talented individuals' respective websites in the description of this video, but there's only one pen that you can find available online and in brick and mortar stores across the globe with the choice of any of these nibs that I just mentioned. And yes, folks, it's the Estie. Hopefully that gives you some idea of what makes the Estie so unique, but we're not done yet. The nibs are the deceptively awesome portion of what might draw you in to the Estie. However, Esterbrook is not going to stop at what's under the hood. No! Let's take a look at some Esties that offer some outward pizzazz. The Estie I want to showcase first is pretty new at the time of this recording, and that is the Sweet Dreams. This entire setup is yet another example of the team over at Esterbrook being courageously crazy and delivering something completely original with a fun and fully realized theme. Not only do you have the airy pastel resin blending perfectly with all of the little nap time accessories in here, but once again, Esterbrook has chosen to tap into the fountain pen community and use diamond cast resin for this pen, which, yes, sparkles because of natural diamond dust, and is made here in the US in small batches by Tim McKenzie. This isn't the first high concept and heavily themed Estie, nor will it be the last. There has been a wine-themed Estie complete with stem glass charms. There's been more diamond cast stuff. One was made in conjunction with Ferris Wheel Press, a sort of collaboration. That one looked amazing. And even a new filling method has recently been added to the Estie lineup. This pen has an internal reservoir just like any other piston pen, but with a more rare and, I think, easier filling approach using this plunger here. Just a few pumps and the ink goes in, and then take it out of the ink, a few pumps, and the ink goes out of it. You just eject your leftover ink, or to flush the pen, submerge it in water, do the same thing. And the plunger is so smooth too. When I first saw it, I expected like a very metal on metal feeling, but you don't get it. It feels marvelous. Now, if you've been paying attention, it should come as no surprise when I say that the Estie library of pens is constantly changing. So take this info very much point in time, but currently Esterbrook's Custom Nib Program nibs, the ones I mentioned earlier, are only available on two Esties, Botanical Gardens and Nouveau Blue. As far as that button piston goes, that filling mechanism can be found on either the Raven or the Winter White. I very much hope that I have not answered all of your questions about the Estie. What I do hope is that I made you more curious about it. This is a model that seems to be constantly striving to outdo itself, so it's definitely worth checking in from time to time to see what sort of adventures it's getting into. With that, I thank you for joining me today. Check out gouletpens.com for more information, and then esterbrookpens.com if you're hungry for more. Have fun and write on.